Aloha! Welcome to the Live Ukulele podcast. My name is Brad Bordessa, and in this episode, I am announcing my new ebook called Groove Ukulele. We're going to talk about how strumming works in this version of teaching strumming that I'm putting together here in Groove Ukulele. Kind of recap what I shared in some videos this week, some free video lessons that you can still check out, and kind of get you from end to end of how I think people should be thinking about strumming, and then also share a bit about the ebook, of course. So thanks for joining in. Let's get started. Getting into strumming, I talked about this back in April a little bit. I kind of did a short podcast, probably because I was in need of a podcast subject and I covered this. But strumming's biggest trick, I called it, which is kind of an okay name, kind of clickbaity. But I want to dive into it a little bit more than maybe I did at that time and talk about how strumming works. Before we do that, I am releasing an ebook called Groove Ukulele. You can find out more about it via the link in the podcast description, or just go to liveukulele.com. There will be a way to check out more about Groove Ukulele there. But basically, the idea is taking you through the very basics of strumming and creating a system that you can build any strum off of. And the system revolves around there only being one strumming pattern. There is only one strumming pattern. Of course, there are exceptions, of course. But for the most part, most people who play the ukulele, most people who are learning to play, can get away with this one strumming pattern to play 99% of the music they want to play. It's all in there in some form or another. And the strum pattern is, drum roll, strum pattern is down, up. You already know it. Down, up. If you just put your hand moving down and up, you're going to be in great shape. And so that is what the book works you through. We start with just the real basics of a timing framework, how to understand basic timing in music, and then how to move your hand to the timing, and then how to select when you hit the strings, when you don't hit the strings, to create strumming variations or different emphasis patterns that accent this part or that part of the strum to create what people normally think of as strumming patterns, but they're really more like strumming emphasis patterns. And so across the course of the book, it's like 70 plus pages of written PDF and diagrams and illustrations and photos and things like that. You'll go from end to end, complete basics, up to towards the end of the book, we'll talk about how to figure out strums, how to learn to align your hand to the music you're listening to the music that you want to emulate, and then to figure out how you actually play that strum. And I've actually taken a handful of ukulele songs. I got permission from some of my ukulele friends to kind of transcribe the general idea of the strumming patterns that they use in these songs, and to put them in the book. So you can click on the YouTube video and go listen to the song if you're not familiar with the song already, and then read through my notes and see how I've got it laid out and look at the strum diagram and learn how to play that strum as a practical example of, hey, here's a professional player using this same down-up strum to play one of their songs that maybe you've heard before. And in addition to that, there are also supplementary video lessons to kind of show you and demonstrate all of the concepts, all the main concepts in the book that benefit from an explanation. And they're kind of casual. I just really walk through and share how I use these things and the different ways you can think about them. But that's a nice kind of augmentation to the written content of the book. So that's basically Groove Ukulele. But now let's talk. I will give away some of the secrets and share with you how this system works so that even if you're not interested in buying the book, great as it might be, you can still take something away from this. Okay, so we're going to stick with 4/4 time as an example for this podcast, but you have a song that's grooving along. It's going to have a pulse. There's a beat inside the song. Boom, 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 boom. You can think of like a dance music with the kick drum that's 4 on the floor. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's that low bass sound is hitting your chest and it makes you want to dance because it's physically moving your body at that low frequency. And so that is the beat. That's the pulse of the music. And not all music has a 4 on the floor bass sound that moves your body. You're not always in a German club with the big giant subwoofers or whatever. But that pulse is there even if you're listening to somebody just strum their ukulele. Because what that timing is, what that pulse is it's a consensus, right? I've talked about this before. Timing is a consensus because once we decide where the pulse is, we can all agree that we can expect the next beat or the next note or the next note division, whatever that might be, we can all expect it in the same place. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, that's why you count into a song. You count into a song because you're setting the framework for the timing, you're setting the expectation. So the distance between the counts, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're expecting that distance to remain once you get into the song, right? If you're counting into a song, a lot of times you do 1, 2, 3, 4 to get in and to tell the rest of the band, usually the rest of the band, what the timing is. Like when I'm playing with my guys, we'll turn to each other to start the song, and one of us will snap our fingers, or sometimes Nick will click the drumsticks. So we have the count, and we can set the expectation. So we know that when we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and we start the song on the 1, that we're all starting in the same place. And as we continue, the tempo is the same, right? You're basically taking that count in and you're copy pasting it bar after bar after bar after bar all the way to the end of the song, unless there's a timing change, of course. But that is the idea. That's the reason you count in, is you set that expectation for the pulse, all right? And so from the pulse, you can find the pulse in pretty much any song. You know, there's some maybe new agey soundscape stuff. If you're listening to Kataro or whatever, there might not be so much of a beat because it's a little bit more soundscapey and free time, and it's just kind of lots of things moving in and out. But if you listen to any kind of popular music from the last 50 years, it's going to have a beat. And especially if you're listening to like straight ahead rock, pop music, the Beatles, the Stones, Billy Joel, Foo Fighters, whatever your flavor is, that drum kit in there is a really good indicator of what's happening on the beat. So if you're not sure about the beat, listen to a song with basic drums. Because the kick drum goes on the 1 and the 3, usually, and the snare drum hits on the 2 and the 4, usually, for a basic rock beat. If you're going boom, cack, boom, cack, boom, cack. That's what the drum part does in a simple song. Boom, the low sound that makes your chest move and makes you want to dance, that's going to be the 1 and the 3. And that snare, crack, tells you where the 2 and the 4 is. So that's my recommendation for learning how to hear the beat if you can't hear the beat. Which of those is the one? Takes a little bit of practice to, learn how the music moves to the 1. A lot of times, if you're really super lost, you have no idea what's going on. If you listen to the drums, there'll be, like between parts, there'll be a drum fill that goes blat. And when you get to the end, usually it lands on the 1 a lot of times, assuming that it's straightforward. And, same goes for other instruments. A lot of times other instruments will fill into the 1, and it's just everything kind of resolves back to that 1. If you want to find out more about this, you can check out the video I did on finding the groove, and that has some practical ideas for how to find the groove in songs, and we work through some examples. So that's kind of a nice way to get your feet wet if you haven't really done this before. You don't feel like you know where the beat is. Because you have to know where the beat is if you want to play in time with the music. I've said this before. I'm always surprised how many people try to play or start playing without having any idea what the time is, what the rhythm might be. They're just guessing. And that's fine, I guess. But if you want to be confident in what you're doing, you need to know where the pulse is in the music. So by practicing listening to the songs, don't just passively listen to the radio or Pandora or whatever your jam is. When a song comes on, take a moment to think about where the beat is. See if you can find it. Find the pulse, and then try and figure out where the one starts so that you have your count going on top of that. And if you can get to the point where you're counting along with the song confidently, you're going to be in really good shape, because the more songs that you practice counting in, the more obscure stuff you're going to be able to feel and just kind of know where the pulse is, and be able to figure out how to maybe strum along with that song as you move into the future. Because the next step is to move your hand with that pulse. So you have the 1, 2, 3, 4 count. What your hand does is every time you're counting one of those counts, your hand goes down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, down, 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 down. But in order to go down twice in a row, your hand has to return upwards. So in the middle, there is an upwards motion, and you can attach a verbal device to that by counting and in between. So a lot of people, you'll hear people count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so every time you're counting on a number, your hand goes down. Every time you count on the and, your hand is going up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Basically, you can think of it like if you're tapping your foot on the beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Imagine there was a string attached to your hand, from your hand to your foot. And every time you tap your foot, you're pulling your hand downwards. And when you lift your foot up again so that you can tap it, your hand goes upwards. They're connected. So it's like you're puppeteering them in the same way. So if you're used to tapping your foot with music, all you have to do is put your strumming hand with it, and you're basically right on track. So down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You don't have to have an ukulele to practice this. I'm sharing it with you without an ukulele. You can just practice that. Move your hand and count. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I'm moving my hand down and up as I'm counting out loud, because it's just one of those things that you've got to get into your body and got to be able to do on autopilot, because this is the basis of everything. This is the one strumming pattern that underlies pretty much every bit of music you're going to want to play. Down, up. That is the strumming pattern. That is possibly the only strumming pattern. If you want to kind of bother the real uptight bean counter type of people, there's not only one strumming pattern. Well, yeah, of course not. But the idea is that you can cover a huge amount of ground with this one pattern, and yet everybody is always off in the weeds looking for, oh, teach us a strumming pattern, or I want to learn the strumming pattern for so-and-so, when the question they need to be asking is like, I know the strumming pattern for this because it's the same as every other strumming pattern. My hand just goes down and up. Where am I emphasizing within this song to push the rhythm where I want it to go? And once you start thinking about things in this way, it becomes a lot more straightforward to just kind of do it yourself, because it's like, oh, it's not that hard. It's just the same strum. I'm just skipping things. Because here's the part that makes it work. The strumming pattern is down, up consistently all the time. You never stop. Your hand is always moving with the music, even if you're not playing the strings. That's the important part. You can pass by the strings as many times as you want without hitting them and retain the motion in your hand, so you're playing the same strumming motion without hitting the strings, right? Just here doing my air strum, I can count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I'm not hitting the strings, but I'm still strumming, because that's the strumming pattern, down and up. As soon as you put an ukulele in there, you might expect that you have to hit the strings, but you don't have to hit the strings. Just move your hand a little bit away from you, and you can pass by the strings even as you're holding the ukulele, making the strumming motion. So I recommend that you practice strumming down, up, down, up, down, up on the ukulele, making sound. Chick, 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 chick. And then you practice the same hand motion without hitting the strings. You just move your hand out half an inch and pass them by. And then the magic starts to happen when you combine them together. When you combine them together is when things get really interesting, because now all of a sudden you have positive spaces and negative spaces on what I call the grid, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's the grid. And your hand is always going to go down on the counts and up on the ands. That is the hand motion. It never changes. It's always the same with this system. What does change is when you hit the strings and when you miss the strings. So basically, it's kind of a binary sort of a, what would you call it? It's a binary kind of a system where you're either on or off, strumming or missing. Those are your two options. But your hand's always going in the same directions consistently. Whether you hit the strings or not is the question. Okay, so to get started, you can begin by just playing down, 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 down. And you'll notice that in between, in order to play down, 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 without any ups, you have to move upwards to get back to the down. Right? So now I have my ukulele. I'm going to play this, try and play along, and notice what your hand is doing. It should be just going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, even though you're not actually hitting the strings on the way by. Down, 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 down. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. The whole time, I'm just hitting down strums, but my hand is moving in that motion, down, up, down, up, down, up, the whole way, and that keeps me on time. If I try and play on the counts, playing down and ups, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... What that does is it offsets everything so that when you go to play more complex rhythms, your hand has to play way faster in order to get kind of the next note divisions in there. And usually you don't need more complex note divisions. You just rarely use them. You might think that it's a nice thing to have I need to be able to play 16th notes. I need to be able to play a triplet strum. Yeah, but you can play 99% of music without those things. You can just down, up, down, up, down, up. It's all in there somewhere. You just have to find it. Okay, so then the alternative, opposite, inverse of that would be to play only up strums. But as you play the up strums, you're not playing up strums on the count. You're playing up strums on the and. It's very important that you don't reverse your hand motion against the counting, because when you do this, you're off of time, because gravity helps your hand fall down. And the number counts are the strong counts in music. So if you want something to be strong, you're going to put it with gravity. Gravity is an amazingly strong force. Let's use it to our advantage and always strum down where we want it to be strong. So we're going to strum down on the number counts and up in between. So if we were to count this in, be like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Really important that you practice being able to strum up on the ands. But the hand motion is the same. Even while I was playing that, my downs were still on the count. I just wasn't hitting the strings as I went by. So before you do anything else, practice being able to hit the strings in certain places and miss them in other places. And it can be really simple exercises at first. It can just be this down, 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 up, 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 that kind of a thing, and that's fine. And in the Groove Ukulele ebook, we start from just hitting one strum per bar and playing where you possibly could hit the strings. There's 8 locations, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and we practice rotating all the way through those. And then adding different combinations together. So you practice step by step, getting more and more comfortable with adding the beats, or not adding the beats, but adding hits on top of your steady down, up strum pattern. Okay. But in the meantime, just down, 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 up, up, up is great. But as you start getting into more complicated stuff, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to figure out how to apply it to this down-up motion, in which case the code is cracked for you. The system tells you where everything needs to go. Or what you're going to do is you're going to hear a strum pattern and your brain's going to go, oh, yes, a strum pattern. I'm so excited. I'm going to play the strum pattern. And what you're going to do is you're going to robot your hand in the directions that the strum pattern says without any regard for the timing. The former is a much better approach because it gives you a system for sustainably keeping on that time throughout pretty much any song, throughout pretty much any kind of music. It's just much more useful in the long run to get comfortable with that. Okay, so let's look at down, down, up, up, down. This is a very common strum. Everybody teaches it. Some people put a fan in there and they call it the calypso strum or whatever. And, you know, anybody who has really thought about strumming in this way before is going, yeah, but it's just a down-up strum. You're just not hitting all the strings all the time. And that seems to be the case. So let's look at down, down, up, up, down. If you're having a hard time visualizing this, check out the last video in my strum workshop crash course thing, because I talk about it there and I've got some visuals and you can actually see me play, which is probably a lot easier than listening here on the podcast. But basically, you have to think about where things are going to land. Down, down, up, up, down. You can assume that that all fits within one bar. And so following the grid, following our steady hand motion that never changes, you have to think, well, where can those pieces of down, down, up, down fit? It starts with a down. We'll assume that's one. Pretty safe assumption. Down. And then you have another down. So you have to skip your up to go back to down again. So you're playing 1, 2. 1 and 2. Those are your down, down. And then it switches to 2 ups in a row. Down, down, up, up. And so from 1 and 2, down, down, you have an up. So you're going to be on 2 and hitting the strings on the way up. So down and miss, down, up, and then to get a second up in a row, we have to miss the down. So we're missing down on the third beat and playing 3 and. Your hand comes up and strikes the strings. Down, down, up, up. And then to finish it off, you just go down on the 4. But by keeping your hand on that steady motion, it tells you what the timing is for that strum. You don't have to wonder, like, oh, I wonder what the timing is for this strum. Because you see people throw around strumming patterns that they play. Oh, yeah, for this song, the strumming pattern is da-da-da-da-da. That doesn't really tell you much. That's musically, it tells you about as much as a tab tells you about the timing, which is nothing. Really, there's nothing to it. But if you assume that your hand is always going down and up, and you assume that the person who is telling you what the strum is also following that convention, then you can puzzle out how the strum would probably land, how it would probably go. And so in the case of down, down, up, down, the hand movements that are built into a steady down, up strum tell us where down, down, up, down is going to land. Okay, so we have down on the 1, miss on the 1 and, down on the 2 beat. And then we're transitioning to up strum on 2 and, missing on 3, down, up strum on 3 and then back to down on 4. And then our hand is going to skip up on 4 and. We're going to miss that one. And that's the full rotation. And then you just do it again and again and again in a circle. But this strum really tripped me up at the beginning when I first learned it. 1 year into playing ukulele, maybe probably not even a year, maybe 6 months into playing ukulele, I went to a Roy Sakumo workshop that he held before the ukulele festival in Waikoloa. And so there's a free workshop. It's like, yeah, go check it out. And go sat in the auditorium and listen to him share about this strum. It's like, oh, wow, that sounds so cool when he does it. But when I go home and I practice it, it doesn't sound anything like that. Why not? And the reason was I was thinking down, down, up, down in my head and trying to make my hand go in those motions without any regard for the timing. And if I had known at the time, you just keep your hand moving all the time with the count, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and it would have been a piece of cake. Because all you're doing is dropping pieces out and missing the strings in certain spots. Your hand moves the whole time, but you don't always hit the strings. And so what you're really looking for as you learn to strum, if you insist on finding the strumming pattern for a certain song or learning a certain strumming pattern, what you need to be focused on is, where does this rhythm emphasize? I know what the strumming pattern is. It's got to be down, up. That's the strumming pattern for almost everything. So what you want to know is, okay, where does this song miss? Where does this song hit? Where do I want to emphasize? That is where the musicality of rhythm comes in. That's a whole nother long road that we kind of go down in the ebook, but is a little bit overkill for an overview podcast like this. But that is the end goal, is being able to just listen to something and hear how you would interpret it on the instrument through that down-up strum. Because I know a lot of people are out there skeptical about this. Oh, that can't be, James plays the mono strum, or he uses cherry picking, but it was really James that stuck this in my head and kind of, it was in there, but I hadn't really registered that, like, oh yeah, duh, this is something that other people think about this way as well. It must be valid to teach it in this style. Was that, I think I said something along the lines of, this is on the Eutropolis podcast. When I went on his podcast as a guest, we talked about how I wanted to do some sort of a strumming lesson project. And so that's what this is. But at the time, he's like, oh yeah. So like teaching strumming, how would you approach it? And it's like, well, I think you teach it by locking your hand to the same motion, then you just skip things. He's like, yeah, there's only one strum. And so that was kind of confirmation that I was on the right track. He's like, yeah, there's only one strum. And hearing James, of all people, who can strum any strum, literally any strum that he would possibly want to strum, he can do it. To hear that he thinks of it and internalizes it as, yeah, there's only one strum, that was really impactful. So thanks, James, for giving me a whole lot of work to put this whole new ebook together. So next time you're out and about in the real musical world, don't think about the strumming pattern. Think about the emphasis pattern that your down-up strum is going to capture. When are you going to hit the strings? When are you going to skip the strings? And if you don't know where the beat is or what the count is, don't start playing until you do. No guessing. Sometimes you just have to guess, but rhythm is not something you really ever have to guess about unless you're playing some really worldly out there stuff, like you just are sitting in by happen chance with an African band, or you went to Pakistan and you're playing with some local musicians there. It's like obscure stuff notwithstanding, you're always going to, in Western music, be able to figure out where the beat is, if the beat is something that is relevant to you. Like I said, soundscapey kinds of stuff doesn't really apply. That's not the same sort of a thing. But if you're jamming with a band and they're playing Mustang Sally, there's a timing in there, assuming they're any kind of good, or maybe they don't know about this strumming trick and they're just guessing themselves, but you shouldn't have to guess to know what the rhythm is. Find the beat, move your hand with the beat, and worst case scenario, you just play down, up. That is a completely valid rhythm. That is the rhythm that 90% of drummers play on their hi-hat throughout the whole song. Like if you listen to like the hit songs from the 70s, hi-hat, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. There's nothing wrong with that rhythm. It might not be the most appropriate rhythm for you as the ukulele player. Maybe you want to advance to something more interesting in the long run. But just down, up, down, up, down, up. There's nothing wrong with that as long as it's in time. But you can't be in time if you're guessing. So know where the beat is, move your hand, and then eventually, once you get comfortable with that cadence, with where the beat is, while also moving physically with the beat, then you can think about dropping out rhythms to emphasize the stuff that you do want to emphasize. Because that's what music is all about, is contrast, really. Loud, soft. Note, rest. And then we have strumming and not strumming. By not strumming, you're making the places you do strum emphasized so that they feel more important. They're accented because you're missing. They're not accented because you play them harder. Necessarily, you can play them harder, but if you leave out the rest of the strums, when you do play, it's going to sound accented. That's where you're going to drive the rhythm because you are playing something in that place. So you don't necessarily have to work harder. You can just take out the things that change the perspective of the dynamics. If everything is loud all the time, nothing is loud by comparison, right? If you're standing right next to a jet turbine, what's going to be louder than that? You're already deaf. It doesn't matter. But if you're, in the middle of a forest and all of a sudden somebody comes up on you and like, hey, look, there's a deer, bang, with their shotgun, that's going to be really loud by comparison of the forest sounds. And so that contrast is what creates the dynamics and the accents. So Groove Ukulele is available if you follow the link in the podcast description. Otherwise, just go to liveukulele.com and check it out. It is a 70-plus page PDF ebook. It has strumming diagrams along the lines of the grid that I've talked about here. The diagrams show the count, show the strum directions, but then show the highlights of when you're hitting the strings and when you're missing the strings. It walks you through just understanding timing in general, how timing is divided, and then you begin to work up through various exercises of moving your hand on the grid and then hitting strums in certain places and leaving it out in other places. And it gets more and more complex and builds through the book, and then starts to talk about how to figure out your own strums, how to break into more advanced timings if you need them. Most people won't, but it's there if you do. And then also a couple of strumming techniques like the chuck and the rasgueado, probably not saying that right, but the fan strum, the one that everybody puts in a down, down, up, up, down, and then calls it calypso. That's in there for your interest. And then you can also follow along in the supplementary video lessons, which are included with your ebook purchase. You can access those through your account on Live Ukulele. Once you buy the book, the videos will also be on the same page that you download the book from. And yeah, those lessons are kind of a casual look through the concepts of the book with some practical applications and demonstrations and walkthroughs and things like that. Close-ups, it's my standard 2-camera setup. So there's one of, all of me, and then one of just my playing hands on the ukulele, so you can see that up close, see what kind of strumming tricks I'm doing, even though there aren't really any tricks. The only trick is that you just keep your hand moving the whole time along with the beat, and you never guess. No guessing. This podcast marks the beginning of, or kind of maybe the day before the beginning of my launch week, but the book will be on sale for 20% off until the 26th at midnight Hawaii Standard Time. So if you're interested in the contents and improving your strumming, getting more comfortable with that, then I encourage you to check it out. and you get 20% off if you get it before the 26th. After that, price goes back to normal, which is also quite reasonable, but wanted to give a deal to those folks who jumped in early. Thank you so much for your consideration, and if you made it this far, thanks for listening. My name is Brad Bordessa. The Live Ukulele podcast is published on the first and third Saturdays of every month. If you're on Big Island this weekend, come check out my band tomorrow at the Mauiola benefit concert at Parker Ranch Center. It's going to be great music all day, but we're playing at 12:10 for 20 minutes. Real short. Get it, got it, good kind of a performance, but it's really a privilege to be there and to be contributing in some way. Very easy to feel helpless in a situation like this. So we're stoked to be participating. And if you're around, please come check us out. All my very best. Keep on jamming, play with those strumming tricks, and I'll see you in the Groove Ukulele lessons. Aloha.